From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
With a high-profile case triggered by the Mueller probe going to trial and senators considering President Trump's second nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court, the country's judicial system is in the spotlight. This week, we break down the legal landscape locally and nationally with the dean of the Roger Williams University School of Law, Michael Yelnosky. Then, Rhode Island leaders have made major investments in job training programs to get people back to work. Is it working, and what else needs to be done? On the second half, the director of the Department of Labor and Training, Scott Jensen. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program, as always, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi. Michael Yelnosky, Dean of the Roger Williams University School of Law. Welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
As Ted pointed out right before we started the show, you're the only dean of the School of Law Law School in Rhode Island, so we're just going to call you the dean for the entire show.
I answer to the dean.
I like it. Look, at the top of the show there, I talked about national issues, but I want to focus locally briefly to begin here, because we learned this week that longtime Judge Michael Silverstein informed the Chief Justice and the Governor that he was retiring in September. I think he's turning 85 that month. He's been on the bench for almost a quarter century.
Look, sharp as ever when you're in his courtroom. We should say, and like, you hear he's in his 80s, but
we've been in that courtroom a lot, and I think that really speaks to the type of cases he handles. He handles some really complex civil cases. A lot of people remember him from 38 Studios. He handled a chunk of Central Falls, lead paint, big business cases. I could go on and on. What's going to be the impact of his departure from the courts?
Well, he is a remarkable guy. We gave him an honorary degree in 2016, and as you said, he's as sharp as you can possibly imagine. You know, I think that what he did was establish the business calendar as a really valuable addition to the Rhode Island court system. And I think there's some grooming going on for people to follow in his footsteps. Judge Stern has been doing some business calendar work. Judge Leach has been doing some business calendar work. This obviously creates a vacancy. I don't know whether the governor and the JNC would be interested in finding someone for that particular assignment. Probably not, but he'll be missed. But he blazed a great trail for others to follow. I think the business calendar and the idea of the business calendar is in terrific shape.
Real quick on the business calendar idea, I know a lot of companies, businesses would traditionally go to the federal court to handle some litigation. With Judge Silverstein's reputation, now I know statutes really kind of determine you go federal, you go state, but were there some cases that maybe could have been handled by the federal court, but because of his reputation and his knowledge in that area, they landed in his courtroom?
I mean, there's, as you say, there are some matters that have to be in his courtroom where the litigants don't have a choice between federal court and state court. I don't really know whether there have been litigants who have selected the state court forum to be in front of him. I know that the lawyers who appear in front of Judge Silverstein are very happy that they're there. He understands the law. They are single case assignments in Superior Court in the business calendar, which isn't the case for the rest of the Superior Court calendar. So I do think he's attracting litigants there. I think they're happy to be there.
So we want to talk about another judge, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who is President Trump's second nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. First, just handicap it. I don't know any lawyer who doesn't love to watch the Supreme Court fights back and forth and handicap what's happening. How likely do you think it is he'll be confirmed?
I'd put it at 90% The last day or so, there's been sort of an interesting development with the National Archives saying we're not going to be able to give you the documents that you want in time for a confirmation that would be set to end, a confirmation battle that would be set to end sometime in early October. That, I think, is the one thing that augurs against his confirmation. I think the longer it goes on and the closer it gets to the election, right, and the possibility of the Senate flipping, I think that's the wild card, short of something, some skeleton in his closet. Otherwise, I think this is It'll be a fight, and I think the left is really gearing up on this one. But I think at the end of the day, he's got the votes.
You know, I've read a bunch of articles about how much of an effect Justice Kavanaugh would have if he's confirmed, and of course, as you said, a lot of people on the left very concerned about Justice Kennedy leaving. Roe versus Wade getting overturned comes up a lot. But I've read others who say, Justice Kennedy was not Ruth Bader Ginsburg who's leaving. He was maybe a moderate conservative, but he was still voting with the conservatives a lot. How big an effect do you think it would have to have Brett Kavanaugh succeed Justice Kennedy and be in that seat?
So if you put aside the possibility of the reversal of precedents like Roe, I would say we really won't notice much. He has much more in common with, well, Justice Kennedy had much more in common with Chief Justice Roberts than with Justice Ginsburg. Justice Kavanaugh is going to be to the right of Justice Roberts. He'll be a pretty reliable conservative voter. Kennedy was a pretty reliable conservative voter. There were exceptions. Justice Roberts now becomes the Justice Kennedy, the sort of median justice.
The swing vote.
The swing vote. I think there are some high-profile cases where he could make a difference, but I think for the most part, you're replacing a conservative with a more conservative justice.
And do you think Roe will be overturned?
I don't. I think it'll be eviscerated ultimately, but I think that the disruption to the system and the strength of stare decisis suggests that overturning Roe would just
so they just slowly allow more and more restrictions on abortion, but never have that moment where they say it is overturned.
That's what I think.
You're a historian of that court, and you hear now from people, the U.S. Supreme Court is more politicized now than it ever has been. Is that true, or is that a product because we're going through a confirmation process, which is a very political process, and it feels that way, or is it truly, when you look back in history, has it become more of a political body?
So there are some recent studies that suggest that it is more partisan and political than it was in the past. That if one were to map out votes over the last 30 or 40 years, it is now more likely that a justice who was appointed by a Democratic president will vote on the left, and the same is true of the Republicans. The Justice Stevenses, the Justice Blackmans, who were Republicans, Justice Souter, who didn't always vote reliably Republican, are, I think, perhaps in the rearview mirror, at least for now. So I think the truth is it is a more partisan court than it has been.
To Tim's question, do you think the system is fundamentally broken then for confirming Supreme Court nominees? I mean, right now it just seems it seems like it's basically seen as, it's a party decision. Is it a Republican justice or a Democratic justice?
I don't know if it's broken. I think that it's the case that the adage, right, that elections matter, and we expect presidents to select justices who will share their philosophy about the Constitution and statutory interpretation. So I don't think the system's broken, but I do think it may take a less polarized government to give us somewhat more moderate justices.
So the courts, do you think, really a reflection of politics more broadly?
I do, and I think you're going to see more of that in the lower courts, where there isn't, if you're a district court judge, it's your game. Of course, there are appeals, but you don't have to look to your left or look to your right and try to find another vote. And at the Court of Appeals, you need to find one.
I want to talk about Don Ferris. He was the president of Roger Williams University. He died suddenly on July 5th, not long after he announced he was going to retire in 2019. I think it was shocking to everyone. And I've had the pleasure of interacting with President Ferris on many occasions. And we should note, he was a champion of a partnership between WPRI and Roger Williams University in polling and in debates going into the 2018 season, and that's because he truly believed, I think, in the university's role in the Rhode Island community. What do you think Don Ferris's legacy is going to be?
I think that's just such a terrific example. He was committed to what he liked to call engaged teaching and learning in service of society. And he used to refer to the university as a private university with a public purpose. He really felt strongly that for our students and for the community of which we're a part, that engagement was essential. And he believed very deeply in the power of higher education. He believed deeply that there were some problems confronting higher education, and he took some significant steps to try to address them at Roger Williams. And he did an awful lot of writing that I think will and probably is already influencing other university presidents.
I'm curious, you talk about what's troubling in higher ed right now. Some people say your world, law schools, are facing a serious challenge with, we've seen application numbers decline. I know here in the Northeast, I have lawyers in my family, and they say there are too many lawyers in the Northeast potentially and not enough work for them all. What have you seen? What is the trend in terms of enrollment in the law school, and is that something that keeps you up at night as the dean of a law school?
So let me start with the last one. Yes, but not like it used to. So 2012 to 2014, there was a very precipitous decline in the number of applicants to American law schools in the neighborhood of 30–35%.
Wow.
And very few schools were spared that decline. Since 2014, we have slowly but steadily increased the size of our incoming class each year. This year, we expect to have about 165 students, 165 new students. Last year was also the first time that we have had an increase in applications year over year for 5 years. So it does seem like students are coming back to law school. There's some of the narrative about that is that this is what's being referred to as the Trump bump, that there are young people out there who want to make a difference, and they see lawyers doing things like going to Kennedy Airport and representing individuals they don't know, they've never met. They see the courts, I think, standing up to the executive branch, and they see law as a field where they can make a difference. So, knock on wood, things have bottomed out, and there may be a slight increase going on.
Well, as Ted points out, the national trend on law school was going down. I read that one area that's going up is the non-JD track of education, higher education in law. And I know Roger Williams recently started a master's in law program. I assume it was to tap into that vein of the popularity nationally. How's that going? Does that fall under your umbrella as the dean of the Roger Williams University School of Law? Is that under that school?
So yes, it does. And we recognized that we needed to essentially diversify our educational portfolio and not offer exclusively the JD, particularly when the demand was declining, and saw that as we talked to people and thought about how people do their jobs these days, there's so many non-lawyers who come into contact with law on a regular basis, whether it's in human resources or somebody who's a teacher or a reporter. Lots of folks.
You don't necessarily have to step foot into a courtroom and still interact with the law, right?
It's everywhere,
right? For
better or worse. I happen to think better, but not everybody shares my view. So, we've had a really interesting collection of people who have decided to take the time to get that master's degree. Some teachers, some state employees, we had a reporter, the ED of Common Cause, people who work an awful lot with law, and the program's going well. I think the only thing that is a challenge for us is that the demographic are folks who have day jobs.
Right.
And our program is, we have some classes at night, and we don't have online courses for all those yet, but we're moving in that direction.
Michael Yelnosky, Dean of the Roger Williams School of Law, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
My pleasure. It's always great to see you.
When we come back, the governor has made workforce development a cornerstone of her administration. Is it working? The director of the Department of Labor and Training, Scott Jensen, joins us. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my left, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi, and we are joined on the second half by Scott Jensen. He's the director of the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. Scott, good to have you back.
Nice to be here.
As I said, going into the break, the governor has made workforce development and job training the cornerstone of her administration. A lot of it entails private-public partnerships to get this training for potential workers together. I'm wondering what, do you call it enrollment numbers are like, how it's going? Is there still room for more people to have job training? Is it busting at the seams? And can you say exactly how many people went through these job training programs and are now employed?
So exactly, we've put through 3,421 as of July 1st. The new numbers...
Going back to when? Starting from when?
Starting from the beginning of the administration. I mean,
Okay.
Of course, there's a period of time where we were launching the programs and so on. But through all those public-private partnerships you've described, as of July 1, that's what we did. Our new numbers will come out in the next couple of days, and that'll be probably several hundred more people. But thousands of people have been helped through that effort.
Have they all
Real
finished?
Jobs Rhode Island.
Or have they all completed the...
Those are completers.
And currently employed.
Yes, some of them are incumbent workers. We shoot for a 60-40 split between new hires and incumbent workers who hopefully will get upskilled, make more money, make room for others at the bottom. Because what we want to make sure is that we're growing the economy in a sustainable way, and that's got to start with demand.
I'm curious. I remember when you launched the Real Jobs program, the big push was around these. I think did you call them pods? These like the groupings of industries together. I remember. I think there was one with like a bunch of banks and Brian or somebody was helping them figure out financial professionals and others like that. Which of those groupings have had a lot of people come through? I'm curious which had like a lot of demand.
Sure. Well, I mean, the big one is the defense industry. Electric Boat, along with New England Tech and CCRI, and about 20 different CTE programs around the country. They're partnering also with a nonprofit. EB has a robust veterans recruitment strategy. All of those things together, we're over 1,500 people into General Dynamics.
It's almost half is all to go to EB.
It's a lot. It is by far the most sophisticated and successful program of its kind in the country. No doubt about it.
Nothing's perfect, right? You launch these programs and some things work for 3,400 people, it sounds like. What isn't working? What needs to change? You've been doing this now since 2015. You have a good look at it. You know what's working, what isn't. So what's not? What has to change?
This work's predicated on having really strong public and private sector partners. So it's a grant program. We fund and then help implement with the grantees and with their partners to get things done. So we're still working hard in the tech space. If we can do, that's the hardest and most rewarding part of the economy. If we're able to crack that nut, how we get companies the tech talent they need, that remains a work in progress. We have some good starts, but nowhere near as robust as manufacturing.
Are you getting tech companies interested in these programs, or are they don't want to be as involved with the state because they don't necessarily have to be?
Well, I think the tech companies, our biggest challenge is to say, whenever I talk with companies, I'm like, hi, my name's Scott Jensen. I'm the Director of Labor and Training. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. And, everybody laughs. I'm glad you guys did. But, that's really what we're trying to do. So we have to develop relationships, add value to the companies in their recruitment efforts, and get it done. And the tech sector is the hardest because it's changing so quickly, and everybody's struggling to do it properly.
The governor's administration often touts the progress on the job numbers since she took office. Unemployment's down, total jobs are now over the peak from 2007. The number I always keep one eye on that still seems concerning is the percentage of prime working age people 25 to 54 who are working. It was, I think, a little over 82% before the Great Recession. It was still, I think, around 80 last year. What's going on with getting back to the number of people right in the prime of their working lives to go back into the workforce, even this many years into a recovery?
Well, I think people are definitely wary of how well Rhode Island's doing in the economy, because this state has suffered more than other states have with a kind of a 1-2 punch. One, its main industries, those around the jewelry industry, left, and then we hit the Great Recession. So Rhode Island's got a lot of retooling to do, and taking very talented people, finding them an opportunity in the economy, and then helping them get ready for it. So it's ever more important there, and that's a number that we're worried about too. And the extent to which we're able to make those connections is, what's going to make us economically
How
competitive.
do you reach, mid-career people? The guy whose factory closed and maybe he's in his 40s or 50s. He's not sure. Is there going to be a second career for me? They're not coming out of a high school that you can pipeline them into, a program that their senior tech teacher says go into that. How do you find those people?
Sure. Well, number one, you've got to realize that we need them. We, in this economy, this is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and the extent to which we're able to plug people in is going to make, there's going to be a recession someday. And when it comes, we don't want to be the first one into it and the last one out of it. So, if we're able to have a stronger economy, that's not going to happen. We can avoid that fate. I think the biggest problem is people lose their confidence in the situation you described, Ted. So you got to start where they start. We have a program in the context of the Real Jobs Rhode Island suite of programs called Platform to Employment. And if you saw one of their trainings, it's much like group therapy, because people really need to get their feet back underneath them and get an opportunity and be ready to tackle it. So we are after that problem because we need to be.
Director Jensen, I got to ask you about a bizarre story from this week. Dan Brown, a state employee who was stabbed in an incident, again, earlier this week. It made some headlines. There was an arrest in that case. Looking into his background, we found he's had several brushes with the law, and including an arrest in 2009 at the DLT offices for writing fraudulent checks. He pled no contest to that. He was arrested again in 2017 for the same charge. It was dismissed after police say he made good, and he had another charge that was also dismissed. I should point out to people that you've been at DLT since 2015, so a lot of this predates you. That said, I think a lot of people are wondering how he could not only still be employed for the state, but how he got an assignment from the DLT to work in the governor's office.
Well, first off, he's in the Constituent Affairs Office, which answers phone calls for Rhode Islanders who are looking for help. In the governor's office, as you know, that is, not exactly the chief of staff's job. So, that in that position, Dan's answering phone calls about DLT problems, which is very helpful to us, because rather than 4 phone calls, we can have somebody there who's able to send somebody in the right direction. So that's why we initiated that transfer, and it's worked out from that context.
Are you looking at it now that all this is kind of coming to light? Maybe you're learning it as we're learning it. Is anything you looking deeper into his employment and his future?
We're definitely looking at it as you're looking at it. I mean, with all employees, what we would do in the state is we would, if there's brushes with the law that's revealed either going forward or in a background check, we're going to take a look at the nexus to their job. For example, if you're a bus driver, you have responsibilities that some violations are going to be a big deal for. Same with a correctional officer. So we're going to look at the nexus between your job and what trouble you've had, whether you've been honest with us about what's been going on. So those are made on a case-by-case basis, and we should keep our eye on it, just like you will be.
We have about a minute left. Another story that's top of mind, the nurses voted late this week to authorize a possible 10-day strike notice at Lifespan. Does the DLT have any role in this ongoing labor issue?
Often there's a decision to be made about whether a strike or a lockout happened. Now, colloquial terms, we don't typically, when we're talking about things like this, don't distinguish between those things, but they have definite meanings in unemployment insurance. So, as whether or not somebody will get a benefit if they're on strike or if they've been locked out of their job. So we have a process by which we fact find, and we have to make that determination. And, we'll be probably doing that in this instance. Unless they are able to come to the table and figure it out, which I think everybody hopes they do soon.
All right, 20 seconds left. If the governor is reelected, are you sticking around?
I'm worried about getting people jobs in Rhode Island right now, and love my job. So we'll see how that goes.
All right, Scott Jensen from the Department of Labor Training, thanks very much for joining us. We had Dean Michael Yelnosky from Roger Williams on the first half. If you missed any of it, it's online. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.